Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people go their entire lives losing to the exact same handful of tactics. They mistake manipulation for charisma. They mistake confidence for competence. And they keep losing, again and again, because no one ever sat them down and taught them the difference. This isn't an accident. Powerful people benefit precisely because the majority stays unaware. That's why these principles are rarely taught in schools. That's why they're rarely passed down at the family dinner table. Awareness is the one thing that levels the playing field, so the playing field is kept tilted on purpose. You've likely felt it already. Outworked, outmaneuvered, quietly used by someone who understood something you didn't, while you smiled and called it a coincidence. Let's be clear about something before we go further. This is not a lesson in cruelty, and it is not a lesson in paranoia. This is recognition. This is self-protection. This is power used with integrity. The asleep call this office politics and shrug it off. The awake study it like a language. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So let's begin with the first thing they never say out loud. Power respects the aware. It only devours the asleep. Before anything else, understand what you're about to receive. By the end of this video, you will know 9 things the powerful deliberately hide from everyone else, not because these truths are complicated, but because the moment enough people understand them, the advantage disappears. Most people watching this will drift off in the first 2 minutes. They'll get distracted, close the tab, move on with their lives exactly as confused as they were before. That's fine. Those people were never going to use this information anyway. This isn't for them. This is for the ones who stay. None of what you're about to hear was invented for this video. It comes from Machiavelli, from Sun Tzu, from Marcus Aurelius, and from psychological research that has been tested, cited, and confirmed for decades. This is not opinion dressed up as wisdom. This is pattern, observed for centuries across every culture that has ever organized itself around power. Think of someone you know. The coworker who says the least in every meeting, yet somehow always gets the credit. The relative who never raises their voice, yet the entire family quietly arranges itself around their mood. You've called it luck. You've called it unfair. It isn't either. It's architecture built deliberately by people who understand rules you were never taught. Most people believe power is random, that some are simply born charming or lucky while the rest of us lose by default. The aware know better. They've noticed power follows rules, consistent, learnable, repeatable rules. But before I hand you the first secret, you need to understand why this knowledge was hidden from you in the first place. Here is the first truth, and it is simpler than you expect, which is exactly why it works. Silence is not empty. Silence is not weakness. Silence, used correctly, is one of the sharpest tools a person can carry, and almost no one is taught how to hold it. Picture a negotiation. An offer is placed on the table. The room goes quiet. Most people cannot survive that quiet. They rush to fill it explaining, justifying, sweetening the deal before anyone even asked them to. But the person across the table who says nothing, who lets the silence stretch a few uncomfortable seconds longer than feels natural, is not being rude. They are letting the other side negotiate against themselves. And it works, almost every time. Sun Tzu wrote it plainly. Over 2,000 years ago, all warfare is based on deception, not lies. Deception, in this sense, means controlling what others can read from you. And the less you reveal, the less anyone can use against you. This is where the weak and the powerful split paths. The weak over-explain. They overreact. Every emotion crosses their face in real time, free of charge, for anyone paying attention to exploit. The powerful say less than they feel and reveal less than they know. That restraint is not manipulation, it is protection. But silence alone will not save you if you cannot recognize when someone is about to test it, especially when they come at you smiling, holding a compliment like a hidden hand. Which brings us to the second secret. Now that you understand silence, you're ready for something harder to spot, because this one doesn't come wrapped in quiet. It comes wrapped in warmth. Think of the coworker who barely speaks to you most days, who suddenly finds you in the break room and tells you how impressed they've always been with your work ethic. It feels good. It feels earned. And 30 seconds later, they're asking you to cover their shift or quietly take on the project they don't want to touch. That compliment wasn't a gift. It was a down payment. This isn't paranoia, it's documented behavior. Psychologist Robert Cialdini spent decades studying what he called the reciprocity principle, the simple, powerful fact that when someone gives us something, even something as small as praise, we feel an almost automatic pull to give something back. Manipulators know this instinctively, even if they've never read a study in their life. They front-load the kindness so the debt feels already owed. Here is where the naive and the aware diverge. The naive accept flattery at face value and feel flattered, full stop. The aware feel the same warmth, but a second, quieter question rises right behind it. What does this person want from me right now? That question costs you nothing. It doesn't make you cold. It doesn't mean you stop trusting people. It simply means you stop paying debts you never agreed to. But spotting the setup is only half the skill. The other half is understanding how they quietly gather the ammunition they'll use against you later, and that's secret 3. You've learned to read silence. You've learned to question flattery. Now comes the secret underneath both of them, the reason powerful people bother with either in the first place. They are collecting. Think of the boss who wanders by your desk and just checks in. Casual tone, easy smile, nothing that feels like an interrogation. But by the end of that 30-second chat, they know who's frustrated, who's loyal, who's overwhelmed, and who's one bad week away from quitting. They asked more than they answered. They always do. That is not an accident, that is the entire method. Machiavelli spent much of The Prince insisting that anyone who wishes to hold influence must first study the true nature of the people around them, their fears, their appetites, what moves them and what breaks them. Understanding people closely and honestly was never optional for him. It was the foundation everything else was built on. This is where the naive and the aware part weighs again. The naive overshare, because connection feels good and silence feels lonely. The aware share, selectively offering warmth without handing over a file that can be used against them while staying genuinely curious about everyone else in the room. If you've ever felt someone quietly mapping you while giving almost nothing of themselves in return, comment "I see it now" below. Because you already understand more than you think. But collecting information is only step 1. The real weapon is what they target next, your fear of being left out entirely. By now they know how to stay quiet, how to flatter, and what to collect. Here is what they do with all of it: they turn it into pressure. You've heard the lines before. This offer won't be here tomorrow. If you don't decide right now, I'll find someone who will. A partner who suddenly needs an answer tonight on something that could easily wait a week. None of that urgency is really about the clock. It's about your judgment and how much clearer it thinks when it isn't being rushed. There's a name for the instinct being exploited here. Behavioral economists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky documented it decades ago and called it loss aversion, the simple, powerful truth that we feel the fear of losing something far more sharply than we feel the pleasure of gaining something equal to it. Powerful people don't need to study the research to use it. They just know that a frightened decision is a fast decision. And a fast decision is rarely the wise one. The weak feel that pressure and move immediately, because moving feels safer than sitting in the discomfort of urgency. The powerful feel the exact same pressure and pause anyway. They ask one quiet question before doing anything else: who actually benefits from my rushing right now? That single pause has saved more people from bad deals, bad relationships, and bad decisions than any contract ever could. Urgency gets your hands moving. But the next secret gets your mouth moving, and that one is far more dangerous. Urgency moves your hands. This next one moves your mouth, and by the time you notice, you've already said yes. Picture a conversation that never feels like a pitch, just a series of easy, harmless questions. Wouldn't it make sense to try it their way, just this once? Don't you think you'd feel better if you just agreed? Each question small, reasonable, almost obvious. And somewhere in the middle of answering them honestly, you arrive at a conclusion you would have flatly refused if anyone had simply asked you outright. That's not an accident. That's design. Sociologist Irving Goffman gave this pattern a name: impression management, the idea that people control the frame of a social situation so precisely that others perform the exact role expected of them, without ever realizing they're performing at all. A skilled manipulator doesn't need to convince you of anything. They just need to guide the questions until you convince yourself, because people defend ideas far more fiercely when they believe those ideas were their own. The naive walk away from conversations like this feeling clever, certain the idea was theirs from the start. The aware notice the shape of the questions, where they were led, and by whom. If you've made it this far, you're already past where most people stop paying attention. Comment "still watching" if you're still here, because this is exactly where most viewers think the lesson should end. But it doesn't. Because the deepest secrets were never really about controlling other people. They're about controlling yourself. Everything up to now has been about reading other people. This secret turns the mirror around, because the truth is, none of it matters if you can't first master yourself. Picture someone insulted in front of a room full of people. Everyone waits for the sting to land, for the flinch, for the sharp comeback. Instead, they pause. They respond calmly, evenly, without raising their voice, and somehow that stillness lands harder than any insult ever could. The room doesn't remember the insult. They remember the composure. Marcus Aurelius understood this centuries before modern psychology gave it a name. He wrote it plainly in Meditations: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength, not power over other people, power over the one thing that was always yours to begin with. This is the real dividing line. The weak are reactive. Every insult, every slight, every provocation reaches straight into them and pulls the strings. The powerful are responsive. They still feel the sting. They simply choose, deliberately, what happens next. And this is exactly where power stops being about controlling other people at all. It becomes about becoming ungovernable by your own emotions, power built on integrity, not cruelty. This is the difference between the version of these secrets that protects you and the version that turns you into the very thing you've been protecting yourself from. But composure alone isn't enough, because sometimes the strongest move isn't staying calm in the room, it's knowing exactly when to leave it. You've learned to master your reaction. Now comes the moment where mastery turns into movement. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply stop showing up. Think of a friend who only reaches out when they need something, who drains more than they give, message after message, favor after favor. Now picture what happens the day you stop responding right away. no confrontation, no dramatic exit, just distance. Watch how quickly the tone changes, the sudden concern, the "are you okay?" The attention that was never available before your absence made it necessary. That shift isn't a coincidence. It's proof. This echoes a principle woven through Machiavelli's thinking. Even if he never phrased it in exactly these words, dependence creates leverage. The moment you become endlessly available, endlessly predictable, endlessly present, no matter how you're treated, you hand away the one form of power that costs you nothing to keep. Your absence, the weak chase. When someone pulls away, they call more, explain more, apologize for things that were never their fault, desperate to close the gap before it reveals something painful. The powerful do the opposite. They let the distance sit. They let it speak, because a relationship that only survives on constant pursuit was never built on real respect. To begin with, it was built on convenience. Walking away doesn't just protect your peace. It teaches you, with total clarity, exactly who values you. But the next secret goes even deeper. It teaches you how to spot who never valued you at all. Distance shows you who values you. But there's something even more revealing than absence, and that's repetition. Think of someone who's been let down by the same person 3, 4, 5 times. Every time, the apology sounds sincere. Every time, trust resets right back to zero, as if the previous betrayal never happened at all. They said they're sorry becomes the reason to forgive, again and again, while the pattern underneath keeps repeating, untouched. The powerful don't operate that way. They're not colder, not more bitter. They've simply stopped listening to words and started counting behavior. One mistake is human. A pattern is information. This isn't just instinct. Researchers Richard Christie and Florence Gies, and later Delroy Polhus and Kevin Williams, studied this formally and identified what's now called the dark triad, a set of measurable personality traits, including Machiavellianism, that describe people who behave strategically and manipulatively as a consistent pattern, not an occasional lapse. Some people aren't occasionally weak. They're consistently calculated, and no apology changes a pattern that keeps repeating on schedule. The naive reset trust with every "I'm sorry," treating each apology as a clean slate. The aware track behavior across time, quietly noting what a person does when it's inconvenient for them to be kind. Trust, for the aware, is not restored by words. It's rebuilt by evidence. Once you can read a pattern instead of a promise, there's one final secret left, and it's the one that decides whether everything you've learned here makes you dangerous or makes you free. 8 secrets in, and here is the one that decides everything else. Whether all of this makes you dangerous or makes you free, picture the person in almost any room who says the least. They're often underestimated, overlooked in the loud conversation, written off as quiet, maybe even mistaken for having nothing to offer. And yet, somehow, they're never the one left blindsided, never the one caught off guard. Because while everyone else was busy performing their power, this person was simply using it. Machiavelli wrote, in The Prince, that it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Strip away the harshness of that line, and what's left is something quieter and truer. Real influence doesn't come from being loved for your image or feared for your cruelty. It comes from being respected because you're unpredictable in a way that can't be exploited. Visible power invites challenge. Quiet power invites trust. The weak need recognition. They need others to see the power, to acknowledge it, to confirm it out loud. The powerful need only the result. They don't announce the silence, the composure, the withdrawal, or the pattern reading. They simply live it. and let the outcome speak on its own. If you've recognized all 9 of these in your own life, the moments you were read, tested, rushed, flattered, or quietly played comment, "I'm awake" below. You're not paranoid. You were simply never taught to see it until now. Now that you're holding all 9, it's time to see how they fit together, because knowing them separately isn't the same as carrying them as one. Let's carry them together, one final time. Silence is a weapon, not an absence. Flattery is often a down payment on a favor not yet asked. Information is currency, and the powerful are always collecting. Urgency is manufactured to bypass your judgment. Self-persuasion is the deepest trap of all, because you can't argue with a conclusion you believe was your own. Composure is the true throne power that starts inside before it ever shows outside. Withdrawal proves what pursuit never could. Patterns matter more than promises, because words are cheap and behavior is not. And true power never announces itself, it simply lives and lets the results speak. 9 truths. One thread running through all of them: the asleep react to life. The awake architect their response to it. But hear this clearly: these same 9 tools that protect you can just as easily corrupt you if you ever turn them from defense into exploitation. The line between the two is thin, and it's drawn by intention alone. Knowing 9 secrets means nothing if it changes nothing about how you walk out of this video. Here is what I actually want you to take from this. You no longer have to feel confused or foolish about the times you were used. You no longer have to lie awake wondering what you missed, what you did wrong, why it always seemed to happen to you and never to them. Now you carry the language for what happened, and language is the beginning of power. This applies to every single person watching. Whether you're 20 years old walking into your first job, still learning who to trust in rooms full of strangers, or 70 years old, finally done being taken for granted by people who claim to love you, these 9 truths work exactly the same way. Age never protected anyone from this. Awareness does. And let me be clear one more time, because it matters. None of this makes you cold, and none of this makes you a manipulator. Power without integrity is just another kind of weakness wearing a mask, and that is not what we build here. What we build is clarity. What we build is the ability to walk through the world without being quietly rearranged by people who never had your interests at heart. From here forward, you will never again mistake a manufactured coincidence for real luck. You will never again mistake a manufactured emotion for real affection. That is the reward. Not power over others, power over your own life. So before you go, one last thing to carry with you. Say it back to yourself the next time someone tries to rush you, flatter you, or talk you into something you never chose. You'll know exactly what's happening. And that alone changes everything. Before you leave, comment one word. Just one. The secret that hit closest to home, the one that made you think of someone specific. That single word is proof you belong to the small group who actually finished this video and actually understood it. Because knowing these 9 is only the entry point. The next lesson covers the one mistake that can undo all of this in a single moment of weakness. And I'll be waiting for you when you're ready for it.